You might not like it, but unfortunately the dollar somewhat props up gold. And now that might be a bit of a weird thing to say, considering we used to be on a gold standard where literally the dollar propped up the gold. But in this modern world that we're in, like it or hate it, this stuff is actually what makes the world go round, not gold anymore. Gold has changed for us as a society. And that gets me a bit concerned about the future, because the money that we use today is predominantly digital. Yes, there is still cash and a lot of people still use cash, but oh boy, do the banks have a lot of power over the money that sits in your account. And for arguably half decent reasons to maybe keep the society that we've got used to running, but at the same time, that's at the expense of individuals whose buying power will just slowly erode over time. So today we're going to have a bit of a precious metal ramble about that kind of subject and the way that the banks really do impose on almost everything that we do when it comes to our money. Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and welcome to another Precious Metal Ramble where we shoot the breeze about all things precious and shiny in a bit of a down-to-earth fashion as well. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I like to think of myself more as a theorist. I like talking about interesting subjects, and one of the things that I want to talk about today is the relationship between real money, and using this, and when I say real money, and a lot of you might be shouting at the screen right now going, that's not real, it's fake money, and you would be right to a certain degree. This has no value, it's just a little piece of paper that we attribute value to. But the same can be said for a piece of gold. We as humans attribute value to gold, but what do we value it in? We value it in this stuff, real money. And this stuff is getting more and more controlled, unfortunately, and that's the thing that I don't like. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't think there is a global cabal of bankers in a big room somewhere saying what the price of silver and gold should be or telling you how you should use your money. But what I do think is that there are institutional biases at play from various different banks and institutions and governments all around the world that don't want you to waste your money, don't want you to lose your money, and don't want the money taken out of their institutions, most importantly. And that's what I think is most concerning for me as a stacker. So we're going to unpack a little bit of that from my own experience of this last 2 years of dealing with bloody banks. And certainly here in the UK, the banking sector has got even worse when it comes to just wanting to spend your own money. I've experienced it numerous times of not being able to spend my money, not being able to actually send money to somebody, and other people have found it so difficult as well, as sellers of gold and silver being really kind of put under the cosh to find out what it is they're selling, why and how much, where. We're all just assumed to be scammers, fraudsters and tax cheats, and that's really crap, and I don't like that. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion about that whole topic. So please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying our kind of down-to-earth discussion on this subject. And let me know your opinions down in the description box as well. I know it's a kind of split opinions out there to say that, you know, gold and silver are not actually real money. I'm afraid to burst the bubbles of people who might think otherwise, but they really aren't, and they haven't been for nearly 100 years. In fact, over 100 years, I think it is. So certainly in the UK anyway. The gold standard ended later in different countries around the world, but it's just not how we use gold and silver anymore. They are seen as investment products. They still are coinage, and they have denominations, and we see brand new coins coming out from various different national mints with denominations on them, like this £10 coin here. I know what I would rather have in terms of actual value, and this is an interesting sort of demonstration. £10 in £5 notes, there we go, 2 of them, or a £10 coin made out of 10 ounces of silver. That's valuing the silver at £1 an ounce, which I think shows the real sort of difference in value of money and why we are in the world that we're in right now. Because unfortunately, the practicality of things like gold and silver is just not something that's really very practical these days. And we have to have some happy medium, which is currency. And that has always kind of been the case. It just happened to be that the currency that we used back in the day was made out of metal, was made out of gold and silver, because gold and silver were the metals that lasted the longest. They didn't rust, they didn't go bad, they didn't erode away to nothing over the course of 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, and they have held that value. So that is why we as a species attribute wealth and money to gold and silver. But at the end of the day, there is fundamentally nothing different between attributing this particular gold coin with a value of about £250 or saying that you have some paper with £250 written on it. If I go down to a shop and maybe not £250 because that's a wrong example, there aren't such banknotes, but if I go down to the shops and I try and buy something with some actual cash, I'm much more likely to get a transaction than I am with gold or silver. And that's just the way the modern world is. Now, after a little word from our sponsors, we're going to talk about how that relates to actual banking and the banking issues that we are experiencing and seeing, because that's the thing that's got me most worried. This has such a hold over us, whether it be dollars or pounds, that we cannot sometimes seem to get what we want with it. And that's the thing that I think is going to be most concerning over the next couple of decades. But before we jump into that part of the discussion, a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Vizsla Silver Corp, whose ticker symbol is VZLA, and that can be found down in the description box below. You can also find links to their website and corporate presentation. Now, it's important to remind you that this presentation is not financial advice, but I would encourage you to go and check out their website and do some of your own research into their operations if you're interested. Now, adjusted for inflation, silver is one of the most undervalued assets in the world, certainly in the commodities sector, but surely in the bigger picture as well, where it sits considerably below all-time highs set nearly half a century ago. With a projected 124 rate cuts in 2025 forecast, you can see that compared with the all-time highs of the stock market, Bitcoin, housing and gold, silver could very well catch up to those other asset classes. And Vizsla Silver are looking perhaps to take advantage of that. They are in the process of ramping up projects towards production, making it one of the only new silver miners in the world with regards to potential upsides, advancing projects in Mexico. Mexico is the leading producer of silver globally, according to Global Data's Miners Projects database, and there are more than 757 mines in operation worldwide, 100 of which are in Mexico. And as you can see, their silver project, Panuco, has superior economics compared to its peers at a low-cost, high-yield capital expenditure. If we jump over to the corporate presentation, we can see a little bit more about their incredible project there. This is very important when computing all of the variables of this opportunity. Recently, another silver company which owns a mine half the size of the Panuco project sold it for $1.7 billion to one of the world's top silver producers. Vizsla's market cap is only $500 million in comparison. What it distinctly shows is that Panuco's project, which is Vizsla's silver project, can produce up to 15.2 million ounces of silver equivalent per year. There is no such thing as a shortage of silver. Vizsla Silver has established a clear and methodical path to extracting the silver out of the ground, and backed by a strong financial position with over 90 million in cash and no debt. Global silver demand is forecast to reach 1.2 billion ounces in 2024, which could mark the second highest level on record according to the Silver Institute. Now, with all that said, it is very important to remind you that this is not investment advice, and I would caution anyone to do their own in-depth research. But if you're interested, go and check them out. There is a link in the description box below, and you can find out all of the information that I've briefly disseminated here today. Thank you once again to Vizsla Silver Corp for sponsoring today's video, and now back on with our main topic. So back to the discussion of banks and banking. Now, the thing that I hate most is that the way it used to be was you could spend your money. You got your money in, whether it be in your bank account, your cash in your pocket, you go and spend it. That's easy, that's fine, it's easy to do. But now it seems that that is more and more difficult to do because the banks don't want you spending your bloody money. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not somebody who believes that the banks are doing that specifically because there's an agenda against silver or gold, or you in particular. But what I do think is that those banks are cosmically afraid of not having enough money in their accounts. It's a well-known feature of banks that they take in £10 and £9 of that is then lent out to other people and makes the bank some money, and the £1 that's left is kind of kept in the coffers, and if everybody tries to take their money out all at once, it collapses the system, as we saw happened in 2008 when there was a bank in the UK, I think it was Northern Rock, that people were queuing out the high street trying to get access to their money. That's just the way of the world now, unfortunately. We have to kind of deal with this system of not having enough money to go around in that sense, but there is also enough money to go around. And when we compare it with the likes of gold and silver, for example, we say, well, gold and silver were always there and there was always a finite amount of them. And there's a lot of people who might say, well, that's surely the only way that you can go about it. Like, for example, with cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, there's only a finite number of Bitcoin out there. And if you have a central bank digital currency, there'll only be a finite amount of that currency out there. And you can then have better control over the spending and the money that goes on. Well, yes, you can, but also that's not how we've built our modern world. For the last 50, 60, 70 years, we've borrowed and borrowed and borrowed. And I'm not talking about every country, but most Western countries face inordinate amounts of debt. And we're in this sort of debt cycle and spiral whereby the banks and the governments, they actually want to have inflation. They want you to keep your money in a bank account, and they don't want you to take it out and put it into things like gold or silver or various other assets classes, whether it be stocks and shares or the like, because they know that if they keep that money in the bank and they keep everything hunky-dory, it'll lose value over time, and that means the debt that they have to pay is less, which is why inflation is such a massive problem in our modern world. And so I genuinely do feel that a lot of the issues that we've been seeing evolve and grow over time relate to the absolute complete staggering levels of debt that we see in various different countries, which have meant that currencies will have to devalue over time. Now, again, taking off the conspiracy theory hat, putting the theory hat back on. The theory is that the governments like inflation, and that has been well voiced and well disclosed by various different governments. They set targets for it to be at 2%, for example, here in the UK, or I think it's like 2.2%. But at the same time, they do not like having you take your money out because they want to keep that control. So that's where gold and silver really do play a really important role in my financial portfolios. Now, I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not qualified in any way to give financial advice to you, but there is something different about having money in a bank and not. And it's something that I would highly recommend people look into a little bit more. And as I said, if I'm putting my theory hat on, the governments want to lose that inflationary value every year, but they do not want too much because then it will be a complete collapse of that society. So it is an interesting medium that they have to try and balance each time. And the only people that end up paying for that is unfortunately us. So I take it pretty seriously and I look into that and how it's going to go into the future, and I can just see more issues going forwards. And the secondary part of this is that the conspiracy theory side. So I'm not a fan of the idea of like a cabal of bankers sitting at the top counting their money. There's something very wrong with that, and that's how great troubles throughout history have really evolved, and disparaging things against certain different groups of people have emerged, and that's just not the way the world is and should be. Unfortunately, I say it's not how the world is. Unfortunately, a lot of people subscribe to that kind of idea, but it's not how the world should be. The world should be just about equal opportunities for everybody. And I'm sounding a little bit like a Marxist and a communist here today, but capitalism is great, but at the same time, I think it is important that we all concentrate on what's right for us individually and have the same opportunities. And unfortunately, that is not always possible within the constraints of the modern banking sector. So it's very important, I think, to just be very mindful of these things, but also not have the major conspiracy theory hat on your head. So what do you think? It would be very interesting to find out what you've got to say down in the comment section below. I have a feeling that today's video will probably split opinion quite significantly. So, I'm here for an open, honest discussion. I'm not here for people just to shout stupid things like I'm a WEF shill or a banker's shill or anything like that, because I just try to muddle my way through the modern world that we're in and try and learn about things and have different approaches to things. 10 years ago, before I got into gold and silver, I was very happy earning 1.5% interest on my savings in my bank account, even though inflation was sat at 2%, losing me money every year. Now, I don't really want that, and I feel differently and strongly about it, which is why I've moved a fair amount of money into gold and silver, and it's stemmed a whole new way of life and business for me. But we can't ignore the fact that money is unfortunately what makes the world go round. It's what you pay your rent with, it's what you pay your gas bills with. I've been so Americanized, with your petrol costs, with your home heating and food and energy and everything. Everything in this world revolves around this and not gold and silver anymore, unfortunately. But that is the way of the world. So there we have today's Precious Metal Ramble. It would be great to hear from you. For those who are in the Cool Kids Club, we've got a really cool Kid Club thing for you to do. You're going to quote me the serial number of this $1 bill banknote. So for those that listen to the audio podcast, we've got L509 48531W. If you quote that in the comment section, I will know that you are super special, extra cool. That's it from me. Oh, if you are in the Cool Kids Club or the Backyard Bullion Rambling Society, I've had these two $1 bills in my wallet ever since I went to the USA in 2000. Yes, it was 2000 because I went to Gen Con 2000, which was incredible in Milwaukee. For those major D&D nerds and all things nerdy, I went there when I was quite young. It was incredible, and I loved it. It was great. And I had these $2 bills, and they followed me around for the last 24 years. So you imagine what those $2 bills bought me back in 2000 when I was in Milwaukee, and you look at it today, and yeah, it's very, very different indeed. But anyway, that's a story for another time. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.